Thank you, Peter. Which is his? Oh, yeah.
Hello. Yeah, yes, do sit down. Just perhaps by that speaker there. Yep.
Thank you, Peter. Firstly, I need to make an apology. I did receive your books, and I was flicking through them a couple of days ago and realised I hadn't given them out to councillors, but they now have a copy, but they won't have read them, so my apologies.
Oh, okay. Well, I want you to read it.
You have 10 minutes, would appear, so you must be considered really important to get 10 minutes. Okay. So thank you very much. And if you want time for questioning from councillors, so you need to outline
the questions will come, hopefully. Well, I've consulted, I had a laboratory here in Waipapa. I've now sold that. I'm 80 years of age now, so it's time to retire, they told me. But I've had 7 heart attacks, which doesn't help either. And I've consulted in Hawaii and Australia, UK, and most of America and Canada. And I set up my laboratory in Waipapa, and I've sold that to my business partner now. Raymond Burr has it. So, but one of the things that concerns me in this area is because you've got argillite clays underneath and bentonite have been dumped on top, and they're both structureless clays, and that it's prone to erosion. Doesn't matter what you do with it, it's going to erode, because that's probably what the Canterbury Plains and the Tekapau Plains and all the other plains are made of, erosion, so it's just a natural phenomenon. But to stop it happening, one of the major things that I find is a big thing in New Zealand and Australia is this big emphasis on nitrogen. You should never apply nitrogen to those soils. You get the natural nitrogen process going again and you won't have the erosion. You get deeper rooted plants. But by putting nitrogen on the top, you're encouraging all those roots right to the very surface. And then, of course, the first time it rains, the first time a cow treads on it and it's wet, it erodes, and that's going to happen. And if you have a look at that little book that hopefully you've arrived here now, but you'll see we've knocked out nitrogen in the Wakatani area. We've increased their production. Well, we've done this in every farm. We're averaging over 63%, not we, I no longer own it, but they're averaging over 63% in production lift by knocking out nitrogen. And we have to understand that the soil is the plant's stomach. It's only a digestive system it has, and you can't put on one element and hope to get the results. It's not going to happen. There's 17 essential elements for plant growth, and if any one of those is limiting, it's known as lost justice one Liebig's law of minimum. If any one of those is limiting, that's the one that has to be addressed. There's no way that you can do it with any 1, 2 or 3 elements. We've been brainwashed in believing NPK is going to solve it. It's just like going to school and saying ABC is the end of the alphabet. It doesn't work that way. It's never going to work that way. Mother Nature, or the Creator, created this very wisely, and it's going to work if we obey His rules. But as soon as we slap Him in the face, as Dr. Albrecht, who I studied under in America, he said, if you rape Mother Nature, the day will come when she'll slap you in the face. And that's what's happening on a global scale now. We've got water pollution, we've got animal health problems, and we've got this new mycoplasma bovis. And of course, it's not a problem. What's happened is the animal's resistance has dropped, and now it's struck. And it's going to strike every herd that's got that non-protein nitrogen going in. With this, the amount of nitrogen in the animal has to go and drink water because it's got this NPN, what's this non-protein nitrogen. If it eats that, then it's got to flush it out again, otherwise it dies. So the animal goes over and drinks and urinates and defecates and everything else, and everyone's blaming the cow. It's not. It's garbage in and garbage out. The animal's the best recycler creator ever made was a ruminating animal. It's the only one that can turn sunlight back into meat again. And unless we address that, we're going to have problems. So any questions?
First of all, that was very thorough and concise. And thank you very much. I'm sure it's a subject that will be close to some councillors' hearts. So questions, councillors?
Don't be scared of me. My wife's only 4'11" and she's not scared of me. So
I have one question.
So you're
Quick,
scared
just
of
a,
her.
yes.
one quick question, Peter. What's your academic background?
I get a degree in agronomy in America, and I did a master's degree in animal nutrition in America, and I studied under Bob Scott and Dr. Tim Mason, and done it under Dr. Albrecht in soil science. Yeah, so I was mentioned in a court case in Dunedin a few years ago, and a lot of people, all they remember is that. I wasn't even invited to the court case. I had nothing to do with it. But the so-called expert used my name in the court case, and the judge slated me, and it would come out as free to every newspaper in New Zealand. And it was then taken to the Supreme Court. They threw it out, and then they said any compensation for Dr. Lester will be too little, too late. And then at the end of that, they said there's no law to cover compensation. So we took that to the Court of Appeal. They sat on it for 9 months and 3 days and said it was 3 days over the appeal time. So give us another $7,000 and we'll try again. We did that twice, and all they were doing is taking the money off us. So we had to wipe the whole thing. But that was the start of my heart attack. So I had seven in a row. I just got over the last one, hopefully have. Yeah.
Thank you. Questions? Paul?
Quick question for you, probably, Chair. You've got the copies of the book?
Yes, I think we've put them
In the copy?
I've got 2 copies.
I've got some more in my office as you go in. And
Yeah, I'd be really intrigued to have a read.
yeah, no, it's a very good read, and it's a really good thinking process that you've gone through here, and I think we do need to think about it. Are there any more questions for Peter?
Well, I'm prepared to throw my lot into the council. I would say I probably haven't got a lot of years left. I'm clocking up 80 now, and I've had 7 heart attacks. So apparently they can't put a stent in the last one, so the heart's got to die. And I said they'd get someone else's heart. I said I'd prefer to die with the one I got. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. And people such as yourself are really valuable in our community, and we appreciate your thought. Even it's outside the normal thinking patterns, and we need people like you to continue to challenge what we are currently doing as the norm. So thank you very much for attending.
Thank you,
Give us your
Peter.
thoughts.
Thank you.
Jean hasn't turned up, has she? No, she hasn't. Chris?
Chris is here.
Mr. Chairman, will those books be distributed today?
Yes, I will do so. So,
Morning.
good morning, Chris. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yours was a very extensive submission, and lots of questions for us in it, and thoughts. So, unfortunately, you only seem to have, and I didn't make this list, so don't scowl at me, but 5 minutes. Can you do it in 5 minutes? And do you want any questions, or you just want to deliver to us?
I was just going to perhaps spend the 5 minutes restating a couple of several key points, if you like,
Rightio.
but rather than going through the. Tom says I asked 29 questions.
Yeah, he counted them. The floor is yours.
Yeah, okay, right. So so it's a few weeks since I wrote the submission, and I have to say that in the end, council has to balance a considerable range of activities and responsibilities off what is a very skinny rating base, and I think that situation is evident in the construct of the plan. That despite the fact that you've sought or are seeking a rates increase, I think there's still a degree of rationalisation having taken place, and that that might be at the expense of the prosperous economy and vibrant community outcomes. And I'll just perhaps go through and explain why. But despite that, I've supported all the environmental proposals, but I do think there's this might be about process and the submission process or the way the council organises information. But I did feel that there were issues around the way that information was presented, such that you're probably likely to get opinions because you can't. I felt I couldn't access information to actually educate myself about the issues. It was difficult to find information, at least online. So what I'm talking about here is that there was an apparent lack of evidence, objective evidence, to support the claims that we have we're in an environmental mess. That there was an emphasis upon funding initiatives and processes rather than what goals sought to be achieved. That the consultation has been corralled towards significant changes only, not the breadth of a plan, which I felt was an issue. And I restate the difficulty I had in accessing qualified online information to try and understand these issues in a broader sense. So it led me to suggest in my submission that perhaps the way that all council information is organised and communicated needs to be rethought, and that one line of thought is that it could be organised to originate from 3 performance dashboards, one for each of the 3 expected community outcomes. Healthy environment, vibrant community and prosperous economy. Pardon me. So another view I have is that the published timelines for all the strategic goals were pretty lax. I think in my view, council needs to have considerably more organisational ambition and urgency, as perhaps well as having higher performance expectations. And that could result in the published timelines being considerably shortened. Now, as a couple of examples, the 4 environmental focus areas have a sum total of 8 goals that need to be achieved by 2025, an average of 2 goals per focus area over 7 years. It's hardly demanding, in my view, and seems inconsistent with council's message that we've got a urgent need to act and clean up an environmental mess. It just doesn't seem to be consistent and needs to be reviewed. Another organisation that I have worked for some length of time wouldn't accept those sort of timelines by any matter of reason. If you also look at the Sustainable Homes proposal, we've got a 10-year take-up rate of only 3%. It seems pretty conservative. 3% over 10 years is not an acceptable rate, and in particularly something which is well deserving. I think it should and could be much better, and we should be aiming to achieve a lot better. The environmental programs will require a major change in practice from the landowners, and I'm concerned, even though mention is made several times about the need for change management, that council is actually fully aware of the skill set required to achieve the outcome sought. It doesn't happen with a well-skilled scientist turning up and asking for change. And I really feel that investment in change management is an area that council is going to have to put some resources into. Coming on to just changing tack slightly, the region's relative prosperity, in my view, is weak. If I look at the information I've included based on regional GDP, the most recent available from Stats New Zealand, and I was a little bit disappointed in the plan and the lack of leadership in a comparative sense compared to that shown for the environmental matters, lack of leadership on on economic and community development matters.
Yeah, Chris, I think you did practice that, didn't you? We've done that 5 minutes.
He did. So I'm going to really just, at the end of the day, I'm going to wrap up by suggesting that that there could have been a more considered approach in respect of Hawke's Bay tourism funding. That we could have taken a more proactive, alternative direction to provide underwriting for a period of time and put together an alternative funding model based on roping in all the temporary accommodation providers, which is obviously a dramatic gap the way that the industry has changed in the last 3 or 4 years.
Thank you, Chris. I'm sure there's a lot of discussion around that kind of compromise. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Really appreciate it. And sorry we only had 5 minutes, but so many people. But appreciate you coming along. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Chris.
Tim,
Thanks,
saw you
Chris,
walk
for
in.
the submission.
Welcome, Tim. You're aware of the format, Tim, so I'll give you the floor.
Good morning, councillors. The basis of my submission is that you're spending a lot of money on things you don't need to, and you're not spending money on things that you should do. And I think the perfect illustration of that is when I was a councillor 10 years ago, I got into the habit of counting the cars in the car park when I came to meetings because I was amazed at how many cars we had that were never used. I can't get out of that habit, and I've just come in and counted the car park. There are 25 cars in your car park with Hawke's Bay Regional Council written on the side. If I was running a business and 25 cars sat there doing nothing all day or very little all day, I would be very, very out of business very shortly. So when you're saying you're putting the rates up by 19% because of A, B, C, D, and I think you've got all those cars, how efficient are you? Are you serious when you're telling me that you're doing a great job, you're working hard on my behalf, and for 10 or 15 or God knows how long you've had all those cars sitting out there and doing nothing? That tells me that what you're doing or what you're saying is slightly different. So that sums up my submission effectively. The water thing, Lau has just come out, whatever they're called, Land and Water, have come out and said that we've probably turned the corner, that the water thing's getting better. In my submission, I say exactly that. What you say on your website contradicts pretty well your things that we're a crisis, it's a mess, we've got to do something. Sure, we've got to keep doing what we're doing, but we've done plenty, as my submission says. I think we have turned the corner. You've got a lot more awareness, etc., etc. So you're saying, let's put the rates up 19% and do all the stuff that we need to do. Last year you told us you're going to spend 100 grand on Lake Hatu, which you haven't done. So you're giving mixed messages, and your performance, in my opinion, is very poor. The tourism thing, normally a reinforced success. For 20 years on my political career, we had absolute crisis after crisis in tourism and economic development. You finally got it right. It's going to cost money. You have to put money into that sort of thing, and you're pulling the funding out of that, which I think is crazy. The final thing is alas, they had this political crisis years ago. Everyone was terrified we're going to be amalgamated. Auckland got amalgamated. By the skin of our teeth, we avoided that. As a political compromise, we put up LAS. LAS had the 4 chief executives of the councils on it, so it was always a farce. I heard the other day that LAS has been discontinued, and I think what you should be doing is looking, by law, you have to look at shared services under the Triennial Act, and your chief executive gave a very big spiel the other day in Waipau that by law you have to fix up the water. You can't get out of that. You are taking great cognizance of the law that says you must fix up the water, and absolutely no cognizance of the law that says you must combine to cut costs and combine services. So on the one hand, you're picking the act you want to obey, and you're denying the act you don't want to obey. And therefore, in that sense, I think that's appalling, because when you look at the deaths in Havelock the other day in the water crisis, and that was partially caused, in my opinion, by the fact that you didn't share services, you didn't cooperate, and you completely ignored that law. So to say on the one hand, we must put the rates up by 90% because we've got to fix the water, and on the other hand, dismantle LAS, I think is very poor. So that's my submission. I thank you for listening.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much. We wouldn't expect anything less from you.
I think it's I'd like to think it's factually based, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Tim, I have a question. You said that sustainable homes weren't our core business, and yet you seem to think that Hawke's Bay tourism is. Do you think there's a...
Yeah, tourism is economic development, in my opinion, and healthy homes are much less important than having electric cars. I don't know how many. I was going to ask how many electric cars you have. How many electric cars has the council got?
1, 3.
3. I mean, to me, it's much more important. The carbon, the 410 parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere. When I was here at 380 parts per million 10 years ago, I tabled a thing saying that some scientific journal had said we're facing catastrophic climate change and irreversible climate change at 380 parts per million, and if it goes over 400, we're doomed. So to fix a few houses in Hastings when you should be having electric cars, it's now 410. It's basically irreversible catastrophic climate change. You guys are in charge of that. To fix a few houses in Hastings when you should be having electric cars, to me, is gross dereliction of duty. That's quite a good phrase.
I think I've heard it before.
Do you have an electric
I've
car?
probably got it from you, Rick, actually, in your cabinet
Peter,
days.
a question from Peter?
Do you have an electric car?
Yes, I do. I've had one for 3 years. I just went on Trade Me and bought I was going to say bloody thing. I bought the thing on Trade Me 3 years ago. 17 years ago, I put solar panels on top of my house.
Quickly, Fenton.
What have you guys done? This building, I was at the opening of this
Oh, you're
building,
not gonna
and
get it?
Eileen von Delta said, this is a green building. I said, with the water going into a tank, is the solar panel on the roof? No, no, no. We've had much time. Sorry, that's the answer. Yes, I've got an electric car, that's the answer.
Statement or question, Peter?
A very quick question.
Yeah.
You talk about centralising civil defence. Mr Gilbertson makes sense, but do you realise that it's looking likely that the TAs aren't going to have a reduction in their charging, which means that our 5% will be a net increase to the ratepayer for an existing service? Have you got a view on that?
Yeah, I think basically what they're going to keep the money anyway, aren't they? Yeah, I think that's very naughty.
Thank you, Tim. I'm sorry we only had 5 minutes, mate.
No,
'Cause
5
I'm
minutes is
sure
plenty,
you could
Mr.
go
Chairman.
on for a longer.
No, I've got.
And
I bought some cows in Gisborne, which I have to go and shift. I just hope they haven't got bonus.
thank you very much, Tim. Garth.
I like that.
Welcome, Garth. You only have 5 minutes too, which is, I apologise, Paul, before we start. So if you want questions, you need to manage that time.
I assumed that 5 minutes meant that I was only half as interesting as what the 10 minutes are.
I have
But
no
I'll
idea
carry
how.
on anyway.
Like a lot of things, Garth, I have no idea how these standards are set. And I asked the chief executive. Your time's not rolling, by the way, and he didn't know either. So, but the floor is yours, and we always love having you here.
Okay. I'm here because in the old days we were always told that if someone gave a verbal presentation that carried more weight than just a straight written one. So I don't want to be here, but I thought my democratic duty was to turn up and spout for 5 minutes. I was concerned in your introductory statement that we can only expect further decline if things do not significantly change. And I contend that that is totally incorrect. I don't think Council has any factual data that illustrates conclusively that we're on the downward trend, definitely not in terms of soil loss. I don't agree with SEDNet, I don't agree with a lot of the models because they're based on old data and interpretation, and some of that data I collected in the 1970s. When I talk to previous retired soil conservators and to farmers, they are disappointed that these statements indicate that they have achieved nothing or very little in their time. Right? I believe in terms of soil loss, we reached a low point in the 1950s, and then with aerial top dressing came in and the catchment board got going, we did a great job in improving the sustainability of the land. Right? Before the end of the catchment board era, there were 12 soil conservators working with farmers, and I emphasise working with farmers. They were making major inroads into improving stability. However, when the Regional Council was appointed, my understanding is that they believed that they were a regulatory body setting policy, and there was a long struggle to keep any soil conservation people in the field at all. But in 1993, you had an epiphany and you introduced the Regional Land Care Scheme, and 60% of Regional Land Care grant money went into priority areas. Priority areas from 2 points of view: one, because of the erosion hazard, and two, because of protecting waterways going into priority wetlands. And I put in my submission there some of those facts that I know from up to 2008. One significant one is that when we started the Regional Land Care Scheme in 1993, we were second to last in New Zealand Regional Council areas in terms of QE2s. When I retired in 2008, because we had a third grant, we were second in New Zealand in terms of the number of QE2s. All right? So that working with farmers and giving them financial assistance to look after the environment works, and it did work, and it still works. I've got a statement there, that a presentation I made to Council in 2002, and basically it says the rate of uptake of sustainable activities is dependent on contact with a land management officer. The more contacts, the greater the uptake. Experience with groups and field days has shown that the uptake from these is very varied, whereas one-on-one contacts produce more certainty. Add to this an erosion control plan or a farm plan, and long-term work program is ensured, with the result being extensive and continuous works achieving whole farm coverage in time. The more staff in the field, the greater the uptake, right? And that still applies. It's the same problems out there, the same issues. You've got to get farmers, you've got to get land management officers out in the field working with farmers. Currently, you don't have those staff, and so you're using consultants. And what you're building up is a core of knowledge in the consultants, not a core of knowledge within council, right? And I find that sad. But land management officers are not pole planters. They, as has been said within council in the last few years, the pole planting gets the land management onto the farm, and then they're able to talk to the farmer about all the other issues. You put a contractor in selling the poles, the land management officers don't have an excuse to get on the farm, right? And so there's been a big drop-off in farmer contacts over the last few years. Added to this, in regional councils, there's been a huge drop-off in land management officers because of the much wider responsibilities that regional councils have these days. You've actually lost the career prospects for land management officers. You know, in the old catchment board days, you had the chief engineer, the chief soil conservator, and the secretary. A career path for the soil conservator was either second tier or top tier. Nowadays, the furthest a land management officer can go is fourth tier before they have to get out of land management into another field. And it takes a long time to train these guys because they are social workers, they're economic advisors, they're agronomy advisors, they're financial advisors. They've got to deal with a whole plethora of issues when they're talking to farmers, right? And it takes time. You don't learn it in a book, you learn it in the field.
Thank you, Garth. I tend to agree with some of those things. We run out of time for your presentation, but I'm sure James would love to have a cup of coffee with you on some of those matters.
We have, and we will continue to do so.
You
Okay,
have
just to finish there, I've put a document round that was presented, prepared 1994, and has been was the basis of the environmental monitoring program in council for a number of years, and this shows where different land uses, sustainable land uses can be the maximum use, right? And I suggest that instead of wholesale planting of trees, that be used as a basis because it's a much larger scale.
No, it's an excellent piece of work. Thank you, Garth. We'll have a look at that as well.
They were social workers.
They're all
What can you say the three things again?
Sorry?
What were they again? Social workers, economic advisors.
Well, they're everything.
Economy advisors, everything.
They're like,
you know,
they're everything.
Oh, right there.
when you get a big storm up in Wairau, Peter mentions out having fixes with farmers just to make sure they don't go and
We have to move
do
on,
something
guys.
stupid, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what they are
Mm.
at times. Thank you, Garth. Really appreciate you coming along. Chris, I see you at the back there. You're on, mate.
None of the pastoral farmers maintain group.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, thanks, Chris. Unfortunately, as you know, we got a lot of people, so you've got 5 minutes. You want to talk, and your boss is coming on second, so he's got 5 minutes as well. Perhaps you should have done it together. He's sitting down there. So, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, I am basically raising the issue of regional park because I think, you know, when you check the statistics, Hawke's Bay doesn't have a national park and it doesn't have what we call a top quality regional park. And because we are so focused now on the preservation of plants and animals and the very rapid decline of many of them, I think it's time that we set an example and developed a regional park. Tutira is a natural bet for this because there's a lot of activity in the natural sciences going on around Tutira. We have the Regional Council Park, we have Waihapua, we have many dock features, we have Guthrie-Smith, we have the dock, Kiwi Creche, and if there was a coordinated attempt at dealing with all these issues and forming them into a national treasure, I think we would be leaders in the East Coast. Unfortunately, we are very divisive in what we're attempting to do, and I just recollect Maggie Barry saying not long ago that she feels that we should be selecting the species we want to emphasise for survival. Now, if you're a dung beetle or a cockroach, you're not going to get in the list, are you? So, you know, I think that's totally anthropocentric arrogance. And any living organism has the right to be alive, and we should be trying to save most of them. So we have, you know, constantly listened every morning to the radio and read the articles in the paper, which just illustrate the general ignorance of the public about natural history and how we deal with the environment. People, for example, when you look at Tamata Peak, some people consider a bare hillside of grass, which I think is very attractive, and especially when you're up on the top, watching the waves of wind blowing the grass up towards you or down from you, and people think that's barren. Well, that is just as an important ecosystem as any other. So there's a lot of education needed in the general public, and I think by having a regional park where we can start at ground level teaching children mainly to become interested in these subjects and appreciate the interaction in a larger area, we would be doing a great public service. We already have the Guthrie-Smith, in which I'm involved, getting involved in education, and we've developed a very attractive area with many facets to education, and that we're going to continue to do that. We also have the help of DOC and PANPAC and the Regional Council, and I think we should be working more together to develop that as an area so that we can service that area with the proper staffing and the proper funding. And that's about the summary of it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Chris. We have time for one quick question. Paul.
When you talk about a regional park, Chris, you're not talking about some sort of conservation estate. It's more than just joining up all the dots that are...
I think it's joining up the dots and making the best use of all the services we've got there, and maybe extending corridors, because corridors are extremely important in linking genetic pools of different animals and plants, and that would be a very good demonstration area on a reasonably large scale if we all cooperated and thought, now what is the best use of this total land to demonstrate environmental issues.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate that, and certainly I enjoyed reading your paper, and the concept is definitely worth a whole lot more thought. Appreciate you bringing it to the table. I'm sure people have brought it to the table before, but
Thank you.
You need to keep nagging on these things, which you're good at. Thanks, mate. Bye. Okay, we now have David. I saw David, yes. Once again, David, you unfortunately only have 5 minutes because I would have liked to have given you more time considering the work that you and your group do, and Chris do a fantastic job. I drove past there a couple of weeks ago and I couldn't believe how, I drove past yesterday too, but how brilliant your arboretum looks. So, well done. So, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 5 minutes will be more than adequate, I think. First up, I would just like to say that following on from Chris Ryan's submission, there's a degree of a common stitch there, but his was quite a separate submission relative to the trust. I'd just like to stress also, perhaps a little unusually, we're not here for money and we're not contentious in what we're putting forward. In fact, the opposite. We're totally supportive of the initiatives of the long-term plan. Lake Tutera is obviously a major issue, and we certainly agree with the need to intensify efforts there. Our fundamental submission really is that we believe education is vital to the success of your plan. Our trust deed requires us to promote the appreciation and enjoyment of the outdoors and to educate young people. It was for that reason that we became an accountable partner to your council's biodiversity strategy, and with the specific objective of supporting the educational needs of that strategy. Tutera represents an excellent concentration of biodiversity, and we believe it is the ideal location for any expansion or investment in educational resources over the term of the plan. We are constantly planning the development of our educational facilities based around the education centre, the arboretum, its signage, a resource kit for teachers, the range of courses and outdoor facilities. And recently there's been the Conservation Week program and now the new water education course as well. We're endeavouring to acquire more flatland for the long-term development of the property and to cater for whatever facilities may be required in future. We believe that it is important that the delivery of the educational resources and facilities is not compromised by any duplication or replication elsewhere, and that we've made that plea before, and we just wish to reiterate that with what we're planning, we hope that in no way would resources be going elsewhere that would in any way lessen the impact that we could contribute. So our submission is simply that you place on record, please, our commitment to supporting you and your educational initiatives and to deliver the necessary educational requirements to achieve them. So we also would just like to extend either collectively or individually to any of you who wish to come up there personally, and any of our other trustees would be only too happy, I know, to show you what is there if you feel you need to avail yourselves of more information and be more familiar with it, because that's another area we've got at the moment is to still to focus on, is to make people more aware of what we do have to offer up there. And so it's simply a plea, and we're keen to play our part, want to play our part and plan accordingly, and just ask you to note that and respect that aspect.
Thank you, David. We do have a question. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, David. Hey, do you feel that the relationship that the Guthrie-Smith Trust has with the Regional Council is strong at the moment? For example, like the work we're doing through the Tutera Mana Iwi project and so on. Have you got any concerns about your relationship with the Regional Council at the moment?
No. I quite simply say no. In fact, I think it's fair to say our relationship is probably better than it has been for some time and is growing. And we certainly view it that way and want to keep it that way.
Thank
Hopefully that's right. We're trying our best. Thank you very much. Thanks, David. And once again, the council does appreciate the work that you and your trustees do out there on behalf of the community. Doing something fantastic. Grenville, there you are. So Grenville, I'm sorry you only have 5 minutes.
I know.
You know, you've done this
protest
before.
that. Registered my protest. So here I am again, and all I got to say is, well, once more, but this time with feeling, okay?
It's always with feeling, mate. Okay, the floor is yours.
Okay, you say, you know, your long-term plan, everything ticks the box for me, although I will slightly review my position on the local body lending authority. But I want to talk about the necessity of raising capital, with the big ticket item being the 250 million over the next 10 to 15 years to expand the port in Napier. Now, Rex, you said down in Central Hawke's Bay meeting the port is given a 3% return. A figure seems to be arrived using economic value added. I hope that's correct. And that seems to me that works by taking the estimated cost of capital off income. That's the estimated value of capital is then often compared to other investments, whether it's good or not. I think this way has some flaws. First of all, estimated values, they are only estimated values. They may be correct or they may be not. According to the New Zealand Institute of Economic Research, capital gains must be added to the plus side of the ledger. Failing to do that gives a false impression of true profits. Okay, now that's those guys saying that. I personally also believe that the capital we have invested in the port in our region is a boost to the economy by exporters and importers avoiding additional transport costs they would otherwise incur if we had to send our goods to more distant ports. So what I'm saying there is $1 saved is $1 earned, and in my way of thinking, that should be on the plus side of the ledger. The New Zealand Institute of Economic Research further criticises the economic value added methodology because it doesn't take into account that capital costs of today are fixed in today, and yet growth of earnings increase over time. An example would be give is if you went into the landlord business and bought a house on Napier Hill 20, 30 years ago. Today you'd be doing very, very well because your growth income has continued to grow, but your capital cost was fixed. In fact, I see there's a 14% in rent, so they'd be pretty happy. Versus the person who bought that property just yesterday. They would have high capital costs, their profits would be low. So I actually think the methodology is actually screwed in how we, or twisted in how we value the port's returns. Now, we're talking about leasing or selling the port, and I say it has no economic advantage because any money received from an investor or a leasee will have to be clawed back probably, well, undoubtedly at a commercial rate of interest attached, and that has to come out of our regional economy. Take, for example, you lease the port, the leasee puts 250 million in for the port extension and then gives you another chunk of money. We're paying for another whole chunk of money as well as on top of the capital costs we have to have, and there'll be no escaping it because basically we would hand them the means to take that money back, which is a monopoly position of controlling the port. It's simply going to mean that it's going to come out of the back pockets of basically farmers and growers, etc. So we're not winning at all. It's also, if we lease out that port, looking for a profit, there's undoubtedly they'll look towards the workers and see what they can screw out of workers' wages and conditions, and I very much imagine they'll take that line down. So leasing out, there's no free lunch, you know. Well, not unless you're Hawke's Bay Tourism, but otherwise there's no free lunch. Further, if the port is not 100% owned by the people of Hawke's Bay, we might have difficulty with the following. Ports aren't always good neighbours, and it might not be easy to keep them to being good neighbours. We might have difficulty and need legal action to make them adhere to whatever contract we've signed up to. They may not care for the port infrastructure or the environment as we would wish, and it is unlikely they would take the greater social good of the region over profit. They might decide some businesses are not worth the effort, such as cruise ships. 51% of ownership is not controlled. Just ask Shane Jones how he got on with Air New Zealand. It would also mean a reduced dividend to ratepayers. A lot of people tout Tauranga. It's partially privatised port, how wonderful it is. Tauranga is great because it's location, 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 and it has plenty of flat land for cargo handling. If that port was 100% owned by the people of Tauranga, they would have a 49% increase in their dividends. I also would like to carry on.
I'm sorry, Grenville, we need to move on. You didn't practice that in front of the mirror.
Well,
right.
I thought you'd want to hear it anyway. Look, I'll put it in the newspaper.
We have all read it.
That'll do.
No. I haven't issued this. This is just what I've come to talk to today. It's not in my submission.
Oh, there was.
No, it'll be. I'll put it in the newspaper.
Okay.
You can read it there.
Yeah. Thank you, Grenville.
But I do protest that 5 minutes. I think it's totally unfair, and I think it's totally unbalanced that some get 10 minutes and some get 5 minutes.
No,
I'm very displeased, as you can see.
Yeah,
I'm going to sit here and support Sharleen, okay?
Yeah, Sharleen.
And he's driven an hour to get here too.
He's got
Driven an hour to get here.
I have, plus traffic problems.
Can't
Welcome,
blame us for that.
Welcome, Sharleen.
Alan.
Kia ora koutou.
Yeah, and despite the disputes we're getting, you do only have 5 minutes. I'm really sad to say,
That's okay.
and hopefully you can get your thoughts across.
I'll have a scattergun approach.
You did last time.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I did.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Kia kaha, I roto i te mahi o te wānei. I would like to link your core business, which is protecting and looking after our environment and doing remedial work, with the issues I have concerns about, which, as you can see, and I'll start with the last one first, which I wasn't going to do, climate change. Okay, as I say, everything else is moot if all councils and central government are not actively working to reduce the effects of rapidly escalating climate change, both within their own practices and compelling change in others. Okay, most of you councillors and the rest of us and the critters on the planet, all of this is moot if we all end up being fried, poisoned and starved because of climate change. But my big passion that I want to talk to you about, not in the other meeting, is tourism. I believe you're on the right track in focusing on environmental improvement rather than funding big organisations such as Hawke's Bay Tourism, having worked in the visitor centre over the past 5 years in central Hawke's Bay. And as you can see, most tourists talked about the lie that was the clean green image, and the other thing they talked about was where is the visible evidence of Maoridom in this country. So those are two issues that I think all councils should take on board.
Got a smile from down the back then.
Oh, good. Okay. My main thing about Hawke's Bay Tourism is that there are other avenues for doing that coordination and promotion of tourism ventures in Hawke's Bay. They'll find some money from somewhere, but they don't need this huge increase. If you look at other things that have been set up without them, like the Art Deco, like the Pukeora Festival, like the Triangle Winery events, they all happen without Hawke's Bay Tourism. They add to it, no doubt, but it's not necessary. So I think that if you're going to prioritise money, prioritise it on the environment and not on Hawke's Bay Tourism. One of the clear examples, and one of the chaps who spoke before, was he was talking about Tūtira and how that could be a really good thing for people to go to, for tourists to go to. And I was at a meeting with Annie Dundas where she said, Tūtira, that's not even on our list for tourists. We want to expand the aquarium. Well, I don't believe that's right. If the aquarium wants to expand the aquarium, they can do that. But I don't see that you should be putting into it, and I do see that Tūtira could be a great tourist attraction. And that's just one person's opinion. But I would be disappointed if you put your money that way rather than into Tūtira. I think also in terms of both tourism and environmental things, I'm still pushing for the basics in terms of tangata whenua, bilingual signage, more Maori history everywhere you go. It's just not there, and tourists really want it. So it's both part of what a regional council should do and what tourism should do. The other thing you need to know, there's a big tourism hui. I'm talking with some of the smaller operators and even a few of the bigger operators who don't want to sit in that forum and say their disappointment or discontent with Hawke's Bay tourism in front of Hawke's Bay tourism. So you may need to take that on board when you're looking at what you're hearing back from that hui. That it? Yep, that'll do me.
Thank you, Sharleen. Unfortunately, we don't have any time for any questions, but I think you presented your case really well.
Oh, okay.
So did you, Grenville. We'll stop sulking in the back there. Thank you, guys. We really appreciate you travelling so far, and we wish we could give you more time. Tom.
Talk fast, Tom, because I rob.
I'll do what I can. Got a stopwatch ready.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Now, I shouldn't say this in front of before Grenville's left, because you're an representative organisation, you actually have 10 minutes.
Oh, I do have 10 minutes, do I? Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So I need to be an organisation.
Get organised. Excellent.
Arrange that.
So, Tom, if you want to get questions, you wait. Otherwise, if you want to deliver a message, we're quite happy with that as well. So it's up to you.
Okay, cool.
And we'll start the ball rolling now.
Okay,
thank you.
Sweet. So I'm Tom. I'm the regional manager for Forest and Bird for this area. You're all very familiar with Forest and Bird, I'm sure. 3 branches through Hawke's Bay, and we've also got a branch kicking off up in Waiohiki as well that I'm sure you'll become familiar with soon enough. I'll just speak to the points of my submission, so I'm sure you've got that in front of you. But in principle, pretty supportive of what's been put forward. Land, water and biodiversity, the incentives to change, obviously the loss of vegetation since our pre-European baseline is substantial. Sediment's a massive issue in New Zealand waterways, obviously nutrients, etc. as well. And riparian vegetation is hugely important for waterways and shading and temperature of the water for fish. So we're really supportive of action on this front. Same with the future farming, biodiversity and biosecurity. I know the future farming group has already started, I think. There are some very talented people in this realm. You've got some great agricultural consultants in Hawke's Bay still working and retired that have produced work for you in the past that I've noted in my submission. I think it's very important that whatever you do with sustainable farming is that it does not become greenwashing. Which I'm not saying that's what's happening yet, but it has happened in the past with processes like this. Things like the Clean Streams Accord is in a sense a marketing exercise and didn't really address the core problem, and I think that council should really focus on delivering a real outcome through that process. Sustainable homes, extremely supportive of this. From the other regional plans that I've looked at around the country, Hawke's Bay has been leading this in that it's still been going on. A lot of councils ended their programs, and yours is a lot more comprehensive than other councils, so I commend you on that, and I think you should continue with that, particularly those additional sustainable changes that people can make around their homes. Jumping forward to tourism, completely support what was mentioned before about shifting greater attention towards environmental protection. A lot of our wineries name themselves after our natural resources. They put pictures of our streams and mountains, etc., on their wine bottles, on their merchandise. They will benefit from biodiversity gains, I have no doubt. I've worked in tourism in Hawke's Bay with mohaka rafting. Our core business was having clean water that people could swim in, and one of the biggest things we wanted was greater protection for that catchment so that that business could continue. So it is very much, you know, there is a gain there for tourism. It's not just about getting money. Consent and compliance and policy, point 18. We're extremely supportive of more money there for compliance, consenting, policy, etc. If anyone's familiar with the EDS report by Marie Brown called The Last Line of Defence, you'd know that this has been a failing of councils around the country in the past. So we think there should definitely be more resourcing there. Likewise, with extensive water metering now around the country, you're going to need more people to be able to ensure compliance with those limits, and there was a recent central government report on irrigation, and that we need to up our game in terms of the monitoring of those water takes, etc., which you can find easily enough online. Jumping down to our note on the Reo Taniwha funds, I'm sure it's no surprise to anyone on this council that we consider the investment of this money a lot more sensible than the previous action that those funds were earmarked for. I do note that there is some funding there reserved for small-scale schemes. We're not in principle opposed to that. Obviously we are opposed to large-scale irrigation and land use intensification. If there is to be any small-scale schemes, then the council needs to be very sure that the scientific rigour or a rigorous process has been followed in ensuring that there is going to be no environmental impact or land use intensification that comes along with those schemes. And I think council, you will all be familiar with central government's intention to bring out a new MPS for fresh water, to potentially tie land use intensification to resource consents for irrigation schemes, etc. So you would be barking up the wrong tree if you kept going the way you were in the past. And finally, a note on the Ngati Water Conservation Order. Second to finally, I understand it is a contentious issue, but we are disappointed that Regional Council is putting so much money into opposing the water conservation order that has been applied for on the Ngati River. Obviously, we're a co-applicant. To us, it seems somewhat contradictory that Council has come forward and said, look, we've got this real focus on our environment and we're going to invest in it and we think that's great. And then to come out and say, hey, but, you know, even though we've got this outstanding water bodies thing coming through the new MPS, we're actually opposed to the water conservation order. Anyway, that is a process that is underway, and we will continue to go through that process as you are. Climate change, adaptation and planning, it does read in my submission as if you have not planned for the consequences of climate change. I know you do have a comprehensive plan for coastal erosion and hazards around Te Wanga, etc. I am unaware of a plan in terms of lessening council's contribution to climate change, although I hear you have 3 electric cars, but would certainly implore council to work towards a plan for a transition to a net zero, basically, in terms of contribution to climate change, including divestment from any assets that are reliant on those fossil fuels, etc. And a note that I haven't seen the details of the plan for your coastal hazard planning, etc., flooding, but managed retreat is becoming is being utilised by many councils. Horizons is talking about putting some money into managing retreat from flood-prone areas around the Wanganui River, and a similar approach should be taken around coastal hazard zones, etc. It looks like there are some burning questions.
Thank you, Tom. Firstly, I want to acknowledge the incredible work that you, Forest and Bird, do in planting our riparian plantings, and people get out there on the weekends and they really do it. So I want to acknowledge that. On the issue of contradictory, Do you consider it slightly contradictory that your people have been participants in the community process for 5 years, and yet you at head office enter into a process which completely overrides any decisions that are made in that community process?
No, to bluntly answer the question. I think in reality they are two processes. They sit in separate parts of the planning process. Obviously the water conservation order was kicked off many years ago, but I very much see them as two separate processes, so I don't see why they can't complement each other. And I will also note that the perception that it is head office coming in and laying this on the community is unfounded. I grew up here in Hawke's Bay. Actually, I'm from Charitable, so I very much have an understanding of the local context of what's going on in Hawke's Bay, and we have a huge number of branch members that are supportive of the water conservation order, and I think members of the community as well. You'd probably be surprised how many people are supporting that. But in essence, I think there are two separate processes there, and there is no reason why they can't complement each other. But anyway, that like I say, that is a process that is
Paul,
going on.
Quick. We have
Thank you, Chair. More a statement, but you're divesting from fossil fuels. That we are revisiting our investment policy around that particular issue.
Excellent.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you. You just said the Future Farming Fund, you're aware it's already started, so I'm wondering if you can clarify that, because I wasn't aware that we had started.
Sorry, I was under the impression there is I don't know if it's called Future Farming. There is a farming group that has started around sustainable farming. I don't know. I was under the impression there was a sustainable farming group that had kicked off in Hawke's Bay. Maybe I have got that wrong. I will note though, central government has obviously put some money into the budget for sustainable farming initiatives, and I think council would be doing well to try and get some of that money.
Thank you very much. We haven't got time for another question, but
no worries.
Really appreciate you coming in and presenting.
Appreciate the time, thank you.
And you did a great job.
Appreciate the 10 minutes.
Well, we have Hawke's Bay Maori Tourism on next, and Grenville's going to hate it, but they get 10 minutes as well. They deserve it. So welcome, Toro and Peter. We're not clicking you on, but you're taking time up now, Toro. You're cunning. Oh.
I'm on Māori time now.
Thanks, mate.
Atu ake au ki te mihi ki a kōrua ko tai mai koutou ko tō rōpū e tautoko ana tō kaupapa I ta koutou I te tēpu. Engari e kānui te pauri ko tai te rono ko tai te raru ki o koutou urupa I raupuna au e taukuri e pauri ana ngā hapu huhua o ngā tika ngunu no reira koutou kānui te aroha. No reira he te rangatira, kānui te whakamihara ki a koe he reo kaha mo ngā me e pāna ki ngā tāua no reira. Tēnā koe, tēnā kōrua, kia ora no tātou.
You've only got 2 minutes left now. Okay, clock's about to wind, Toro. You're on.
So, my submission's endorsed by Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism, Taiwhena Whangani Rotu, Te Marae Trust, Mōti o Marae, Ngati Parau Development Trust, Ngati Hinewae, Ngai Tāwhao, Ngai Mahu, Ngati Mahu, Kaurana ki Marae, Upper Moaka Hapu Collective, Te Mata Maui Kaiti Aki Collective, Ngā Marae Heratanga and Tamate Taiwhenua. So I recognise that our environment is the worst state that it has ever been, and I advocate that brave and urgent actions are needed by the Hawke's Bay Regional Council to address the problems. Given the limited time I have to submit, I wish to concentrate on the Māori tourism aspects of my submission. So Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism was formed at a Te Kimihanga Māori Tourism Conference on the 15th of August.
The participants identified Māori interests were not being catered for by Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism and voted to support the formation of an organisation committed to helping Māori tourism operators. The CEO of Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism was present at the conference. So Māori tourism is an undeveloped value proposition in the region's tourism future, and we need support by the Regional Council. Tourism is the biggest generator of New Zealand's domestic income. Engagement of Māori in the tourism industry is a significant opportunity to address the social inequities in past and current institutional racism. The Hawke's Bay Tourism website is a reflection of the negligible support to Māori tourism. Māori medium current annual incomes, 20,600. This is about 8,000 less than the average income earner in the total population of Aotearoa. Treaty partnership, the Hawke's Bay Regional Council is a significant player in the Matariki Partnership or Regional Economic Development. Only we will have the desire to help ourselves, so our motivation is Māori for Māori, by Māori for Māori. The advancement of Māori from positions of poverty can be achieved by authentic partnerships with support from partners, our treaty partner. Equitable tourism funding for Māori is essential to the future success of regional economic development. The current support by the Hawke's Bay Regional Council to regional tourism by means of a monopolistic model perpetuates racial inequity. Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism has Pākehā members who are equally dissatisfied with the services of Hawke's Bay Tourism. Māori are 25% of the region's population should have access to equitable percentage of resources as those provided to Hawke's Bay Tourism, where the actions of the Crown or its delegated agents engage in practices that disadvantage iwi. It should act in good faith and provide resources to assist iwi address the disadvantage. The statement made by the Hawke's Bay Regional Council at a recent LTP consultation meeting that Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism will not be funded by the Hawke's Bay Regional Council breaches the legal obligation to act in good faith and consider the issues raised in consultation. So what have we achieved since our inception? We've facilitated numerous workshops and events regionally to support members. We've never seen Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism members or Hawke's Bay Tourism representatives at those workshops. Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism, we had a delegation to Fort Lauderdale Cruise Conference. Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism, we had a delegation to the Indigenous Tourism Conference in Hawaii. We've had a delegation to the Cruise Conference in Miami. We've had a delegation to the Las Vegas Expedia Conference. We've sent a delegation to Taipei. We've represented at the New Zealand Māori Tourism Indigenous World Conference in Waitangi, and we were represented at the New Zealand Tourism Awards in Christchurch. So that's just a short snippet of what we do. We do lots of other stuff as well. So there's a picture of us at Shanghai, and all our delegations we pay out of our own pockets. So if we have to pay out of our own pockets, so should Hawke's Bay Tourism people. So investing in our future, we source some of our own money as well. We source some money from MSD to train 40 unemployed for the tourism sector. Over 60% of those are now in employment, one of them by Hawke's Bay Tourism. Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism, we're party to a trade agreement with the Indigenous Taiwanese Council, and that's got a lot of tourism opportunity wrapped around with that as well. We have companies that provide a lot of international products. For example, I've got a company called Audio Tourist. I provide audio tours to cruise ship passengers in over 100 international ports. We are international and local influencers. We have local Māori networks and relationships that can benefit the region. I sit on New Zealand Māori Tourism, and I get access to heaps of information that I could use to benefit this region. Yeah, the door's kind of got shut on me there. So patronising and tokenistic models of delivery to Māori only serve the controlling interests of those who benefit from the status quo. Business as usual, buy Hawke's Bay Regional Council sends a message that we have a regional council who perpetuates the culture of colonial bias. We can do better. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present to the Hawke's Bay Regional Council on this aspect of the long-term plan. But Peter, I have Peter here with me. He's our deputy for the Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism, plus other agencies. And
yeah, and I'll just, because we combined, we've got a Fishhook Summit with Kaha tomorrow, so we can't present tomorrow because we obviously our Hapu, our Marae are attending that. So I said to Toro would support his submission. And I suppose so I'm here on behalf of Te Whanganui Arotu for the Tai Whenua, as well as some of the other trusts. And as an example, I suppose I picked up in some of the points that were said earlier about biodiversity, about water management, and as an example, if we look at one of the groups supporting the Moaka Upper Collective, which is in the Upper Moaka River, and then if we look at biodiversity, we look at land usage for those Māori organisations that are working in that area, very, very limited resource, then how do they get themselves into a position where they can meet some of the long-term plans for the regional council? They need to create income, or they need to generate wealth. So obviously when you look at tourism, that's where they're heading. Obviously Hawke's Bay Māori tourism is a vehicle they feel comfortable working. We share similar values. So I suppose when you're looking at the regional council's long-term plan for Māori to meet some of the objectives, obviously they've got to have economic development, and tourism's going to provide that, and we're partnering up with Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism. So I take on board what Forrest and Bird and that said about spending the budget in those areas, but tourism, there needs to be some spend in those areas, especially for Māori. Otherwise they're going to go in and they're going to clear their land and they're going to log it, and you just got to think of the what is that going to do to the lower reaches in the Moaka, the Ngararoro, if we talk about all Whākua Trust and that, because we've got huge tracts of timber on our whenua, but we're not generating enough income. So tourism's a potential driver. So what I'm saying, look at some other options. It's not just about tourism, it's about generating income, and potentially Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism, with some of the trade agreements that are done internationally, may provide a vehicle for us to achieve some of those other options without it affecting the environment. So that's just a short snippet. We're just looking at that economic modelling and that as well at the moment, talking to Shane Jones and that about that. How do we keep our Māori whenua as kaitiaki within the environment that we've protected for so many years? So tourism may offer us an opportunity for Māori. Kia ora.
Thank you. Question. We have time for one question.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. Hey, thank you, Toro. Look, my understanding was that Hawke's Bay Tourism has a requirement to grow Maori tourism. Are you suggesting that the Hawke's Bay Tourism is falling down in that KPI?
Well, you just need to look at their website and you see just the paucity of representation of Māori products that are as part of their website. I mean, where else can we find out that kind of information? We don't see it. I mean, as I say, I've been to conferences in Waiohiki that the council's held and all that. I don't see, I've never seen the Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism representation. So how are they going to know what people want if they don't turn up to these meetings?
And I think if you look at our Māori values, for our Māori Land Trusts and our Māori organisations, and I talk forward to Whanganui Arotu, and that we feel comfortable working within a Māori environment with whānau that we've worked for 50, 60 years. So hence, and I'm speaking about our Upper Moaka Collective, and we've got over 60,000 acres. We feel comfortable working in that environment. And we have met with Hawke's Bay Tourism, but just our values, how we align it, just not there at this stage. I'm not.
Thank you, guys. I presume, Thompson, you came along to support. Welcome. And Elena, thank you for supporting them. Thank you, thank you, guys. Toro and Peter. Think you got your message across?
Hopefully. So they didn't mince the words.
Didn't mince the words. Okay, Te Kaha.
Tu ake au ki te mihi ki o kōrua, te kei rau koto tua Hinewae, ko tai tae mai ki te kōrero mai ki ngā kaunihera i te riata nei. Nō reira Ngati Parau, koutou, ko tae mai ki te tautoko i o koutou, tēnei te mihi atu, tēnā kōrua, tēnā koutou katoa.
So welcome to you again, and Hinewae. Now you're on next, so
Steal some of my brother's time.
Yeah, I figured that.
I'll be quick. It was a strategy to get more time.
So we've taken you. The floor is yours, and only yours for your allotted time. And I think.
Atua kei te mihi kia koe, Mike, I te mihi kia mātou o Ngāti Parau. Kei te mihi hoki kia koutou, ngā rangatira o te kaunihiri arohe, o te matawa Māui. Ngā mihi mahana. Ko wai mātou, ko tāki tumu te waka, ko tūtai kuri te awa, ko tātara me Hukirangi ngā maunga, ko Ngāti Parau te Hapu, ko Waiohiki te Marae, ko Ngāti Kahununu te iwi. Ngā mihi. The presentation will be short. All I guess we hoped to do today was to reinforce our comments that we submitted as part of the long-term plan. I'll quickly go over just each of the points to help, I guess, reinforce the points that we had put in our submissions, so starting with the initiatives to change. We are supportive of a rapid restoration in our environment, and it's no secret that we're quite active in that space around planting, creating wetlands, and engaging in the tank plan change process. Some of the concerns that we would like to raise is that we've been working in this space for a long time, and we've been consistent with our messaging around the need to improve our environment. However, I guess a concern is that 75% of the costs proposed in here is going to land with the regional council, which is the ratepayers, our whānau. So it is hard to swallow that we've been so active in this space and give so much of our time, unpaid time, towards the restoring our environment, and now we're going to have to pay 75% of it as well. On to the next one, Partners for Change. We've stated that we also support that initiative for better environmental outcomes, the farm environmental plans that have been proposed in supporting farmers through that. What we would mention is that we think that cultural values should also be a part of our farm management plans to reflect the importance to each hapu within those catchments. So if we can look to try and integrate that into some of those farm management plans as well that are going to be provided. Biodiversity and biosecurity, completely to support that. Sustainable homes, again, support that. That's going to help out our whānau. The only thing we'd like to add to that is that we'd like to see grants of some sort that help with alternative options like hemp houses, something that our whānau are really supportive of. Civil defence, yep, we agree with that. Working with tangata whenua, so that's obviously a big one for us. The Hapu had submitted a Hapu management plan almost 2 or 3 years ago, and it hasn't been good sailing, to be honest. It's had to be driven at a Hapu level, so there's not, I guess, a phone call from the regional council like, how's our management plan going? How can we help? That hasn't been the case at all. It's us having to knock on the door. We've got a planting project, can you come and help? We've got a wetland, can you come and help? Where we thought the expectation of providing a management plan, which a lot of hapu haven't done, and which we don't have a lot of plans submitted with the council, that the council would be coming to us and having that conversation frequently, maybe every 3 months, 6 months. That was the expectation. It didn't happen. Some of the other comments within the tangata whenua space was an increase of Māori staff within council, and ideally seeing initiatives like scholarships established for the council, a few a year, which kind of rotates through engineering, water technicians, consent planners and the such. And I think what we'd put in here was based on 2 people undertaking a 3-year degree over a 10-year period, we'll end up with about 14 staff. So, of Māori staff from here, from our hapu. So, it would be good to see initiatives like that supporting hapu, tangata whenua into getting jobs within council. I'd already touched on better engagement with hapu in regards to management plans. Also, hapu and marae, at a hapu and marae level, you've seen across the board that there's been a drive for restoration in local areas. And it seems like if you don't have a relationship with someone within council to try and get that underway, it's really hard. So Mangaroa Marae is good. There's a lot of good examples of where it is happening, but it seems like there's no specific budget to help to enable those projects to be undertaken. So what we'd like to see is a budget specific to restoration projects. And that just seems like a win-win, because council work with hapu at a marae level, there's a budget for it, and it's not pushing into the asset management or into someone's budget where it's just not allocated. So a specific budget to support marae hapu with planting projects or enhancement projects within their takiwa. Better communications to marae and hapu from RPC and the marae committee level. I know that's challenging, but that's something that we'd like to see progressed as well. Lastly is the Māori tourism funding side of things. It's been a bit of a view that the allocation of funding doesn't seem to filter down to supporting hapu groups. And for example, I think a year or two ago, we had approached some people if there was any funding around establishing a strategic plan or health and safety plans, and that funding wasn't available. Something that I would have thought would have been, you know, would have been there to help get tourism ventures off the ground. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but when we looked into it a year or two ago, that funding wasn't available to support just basic plans being established to help kickstart things, I guess. Yeah, and that's about it.
Thank you, Kaha. Questions specifically for Kaha? Did you?
Yes, I'll just ask you to recall your first day at work here a few years ago when I introduced you to Andrew Newman, and I said to Andrew, do you recall that I said to Andrew Newman, here is the future CEO?
You don't have to answer that one, Kaha. We'll go straight to Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Probably not so much a question, but more a comment, a note for James, I suppose, to make. I'm really interested in finding out more about where these hapu management plans fit in with everything else in our planning process. It's a story I've heard a couple of times about people feel like we've just been put in the bottom of the drawer and not doing anything about it, so I'd like to know where they all interconnect. So perhaps a paper to the Regional Planning Committee at some stage or something would be quite useful. And the other one is this whole idea of the budgets, having specific project budgets. Again, if you could report back at some stage about how, because I'm really intrigued by that idea in particular.
Okay, are there any other questions? We'll move to Hinewae.
How much extra time do I have?
We're going to give you all the time you need, mate.
Leanne, is the presentation ready? Sorry.
You have, technically, you have 10 minutes, but we are running behind if you be conscious of that.
Tēnā koutou, ko Hinewae Hawaikirangi tōku ingoa. I'm here on behalf of the Waiohiki Marae Board of Trustees. Te Kaha and myself came on as trustees a year ago, and this project is around seeking support around the completion of Aotearoa Hau Te Ananui rebuild. Ka pai. So you probably don't have to look at the submission because through these slides you'll get all the information you need. So I'm just going to start off with the historical and cultural significance of Waiohiki Marae and the Ngati Parau Hapu. Then looking at the completed work already done for Hau Te Ananui, what the future of our community looks like, and of course your support at the end. Ka pai. So where have we come from? So this is a bit of a map up here of the Ngati Parau mana whenua mana moana boundaries, and they include most of the Napier urban area. Obviously this is pre-1931 earthquake. Okay? And our significant taonga we regard o tātara and Hukurangi Pā, the Tūtaikuri Awa, which is why we wrote a management plan about it. And the Tūtaikuri used to run into Te Whanganui Aorotu, the now Ahuriri estuary. Our Hapu name comes from, if you break it down, the people from hundreds of pās or many pās within the Waiohiki area. And I wanted to touch on Tariha Te Moana Nui in his role as a kahungunu chief in his time, inviting Pākehā to settle and form the Napier City while protecting against aggressors. Okay, so what is on site? What was on site and what's still there on site at Waiohiki? So originally there was the Hau Te Ana Nui Whare Nui, which is the image on the top right. Okay, it housed our Handsomes down below, which now sit at the MTG. As you walk into the Maori section, you will find them represented standing tall. And they represent our rangatira who died in the Te Pakake battles, the first musket wars that came to Hawke's Bay. So they originally were housed in the original Hau Te Ana Nui Whare. That whare was burnt because of the health restrictions at the time, and it may be breeding influenza. So that was burnt down. And then we rebuilt Te Huinga Waiohiki Community Hall. That burnt down in 2002 due to an electrical fault. And since 2002, we haven't had a whare at Waiohiki. So what's there still now? We have our kohanga reo on site, we have a urupa, and we now have the development of papakainga housing around Waiohiki, which my brother and I are both involved in for a whānau papakainga there, as well as other papakainga builds. And now we come to the new Hau Te Ana Nui, which started in 2016. So what does our community look like now in Waiohiki? We have Ngati Parau Hapu members amongst neighbouring friends and businesses and schools. And these are just some of the organisations that are involved, have been supportive of the Waiohiki build and the role we play in that community. So taking out some of the visions of our councils, okay, around facilities, improving services, improving our environment, leadership, encouragement and economic opportunity. So these are some images of the Ngati Parau Kapahaka group welcoming our visitors, okay, and being available for events to represent us. Now each of these points you'll probably see things that really relate to each of you as councillors here. Okay? But these are all the potential opportunities that the Waiohiki Marae brings to this region because of its locality. It's right between Napier and Hastings. And some of the things we've done already, like my brother touched on, the planting areas. So what needs to be finished? Since the sad passing of Nick, our project manager, the build has stagnated. And you probably drive past there and think, what's happening to the Waiohiki Marae build? Okay? So our who are our contributors so far? Okay, so we've had councils come on board, and we're looking for more from our councils. Our Hapu have already contributed. And private and gaming trusts have contributed. Right? So the total build of the whare is 2 million, just over 2 million. So far, 1,345,000 has been raised, and we need a further 720,000 to finish the build. Okay, Gemco contractors are our building contractor. So here's a bit of a breakdown of the costs of the marae, okay, giving us the 2 million. The funds secured, so where have we sought funding from already? And that brings us to our shortfall. Okay? So hopefully Leanne can email all of this to you afterwards if it makes it easier. I know I've only got 10 minutes, so I'm just mindful of getting through this. Ka pai?
Ka pai.
So there's our shortfall. So what are our approaches to raise the rest of the 720,000? Okay, so we're asking each of our councils for 150,000 each. The Waiohiki, Marae and Ngati Parau, Hapu are also putting in 150,000. And we've applied through gaming and private trust, 16 of them, to raise 125,000, and that makes up the shortfall. Right? So we're asking them for financial contribution to support the finishing of the build, to bring forth the opportunities, those bullet points that I had in the middle of the presentation. Katoa, any questions?
Questions? Neil.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I note the comment in regard to tourism in your submission. Do I take it that you've got a preference to receive support for any tourism venture developments, particularly in relation to your infrastructure, Waiohiki? Would you prefer to receive that through Hawke's Bay Tourism, or is there an alternative through Hawke's Bay Maori Tourism? Is there a differentiation there? What's your
Not
preference?
at this stage. No, there's no differentiation in terms of where that funding comes from.
And sorry.
Yep.
But have you received support from Hawke's Bay Tourism?
No, not funding. No.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much, Hinewae, and to Kaha. That was a very good submission, and I presume this is your mum down the back, is it?
Oh, they're Marae supporters.
Marae
Trustees.
supporters. Okay. Well, whoever your mum is, she's done we should bottle her, her regime for raising her children, because she's done a very fine job. Thank you very much for attending. Bye.
Yep.
Councillors, that is the end of the first session. We are going to meet in the Mohaka room. Are we? Right now. For lunch. And thank you everyone for attending. Great to see Flaxmere here.